Just do the spontaneous adventures, do the acts of kindness, and it will lead your life in a different way. And it might not be all the time, but just little breaks of it will just disrupt your normal day or your normal month, and you'll have opportunities unfold in front of you.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. If you're new here, please make sure that you're subscribed to the One Girl Revolution podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all of our podcast episodes, our original documentary series, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. I am really excited about this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, and I feel like this episode has been a long time coming. Today, I welcome Erica Owens, founder of Frugal OnThe Fly. Erica is a woman of many talents, but I would say that her greatest talent is sowing joy and kindness wherever she goes. She is a revolutionary who's dedicated her life to helping others in so many different ways. From teaching parents how to find free activities for their families or how to find deals in your local community, to volunteering and encouraging others to do good and help others in their own community, to serving thousands and thousands of people with free food and groceries throughout the pandemic. Erica is someone that I've wanted to have on the podcast for a long, long time, and she is such an important person to highlight because she's just like all of us. She didn't set out to start a company or an organization, and she didn't even set out to do something big, but she has made such an incredible difference. She's made a difference little by little, step by step, day by day, and that is truly what One Girl Revolution is all about. You don't have to do big things to be a One Girl Revolution, and sometimes it's just being present in your own community and doing little acts of kindness that can have a massive impact. Erica is such an inspiration, and I'm so excited to share her story with you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Erica. Erica, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you on. I feel like it's been years that I've been following your journey and all the great work that you're doing. And I feel like throughout the past couple of years, people keep mentioning your name to me, and we live less than a mile apart and we've never even met in person. So I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I'm so excited to stay in touch with you, meet up with you, and hopefully One Girl can collaborate with all the great things that you have going on. But before we get into your story, because I want to talk about your own story, all the great work that you're doing, everything that you have going on now, what the future holds, a lot of different things that I want to cover. But before I get into that, I want to ask you, who's a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
Definitely Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I love her work. I love her fire for justice and fairness and equity. And there's one quote by her that it just kind of always inspired me because it's exactly how I live my life and my journey with my company. But it's fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you.
It's beautiful. Well, let's talk about your life. So I'd love to rewind and give people a little bit of a background just about you, who you are, where you're from, a little bit about your upbringing. So whatever you feel like you'd like to share.
Sure. I've only been in the Detroit area 12 years, but before that I was in Kalamazoo. So grew up on the west side of the state to parents that were really, really cool people. I will say that. I'm like, how do I describe them in a succinct way, right? I grew up in a house full of music and art and culture and concerts in the park or different, things to go to, exploring Michigan, being a tourist in your own city, all those things that I thought were cool. And then as I, grew up as a parent, I was like, oh, right, tight budget. They just did the best with what they had, just like I do, And so, but yeah, it's no shock that that I'm raising my son the same way. But yeah, I worked in the yarn industry for many, many, many years. Was a vice president of one of the yarn companies. So I was a knitting instructor for a long time and traveled, all over doing that. And I do love to travel. So I went to all the continents by 30. So a lot of people don't know that.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
fun fact. That's
And
cool.
most solo. So I do enjoy solo travel. And I think it's just the personality that I have that I just always want to meet new people. I always want to hear their story. I want to try things I wouldn't have. And it's fun to share experiences with people, but it's also fun to be solo because you're open to new opportunities that wouldn't be there. It's kind of like going to a party or networking event with your partner or a friend, and you end up talking to each other all night, right? You go to something solo, and even if it's a touch scary, it's like, all right, well, it's going to be boring if I don't meet anybody, right? Or talk to anybody. And then you meet someone that you never probably would have met if you hung around with your friend group kind of thing. So I approach travel kind of the same way, and, always looking for new adventures.
I love that too, just being able to experience the culture. And I have so many friends at different times I've traveled and they've been like, okay, like, are you doing this and this? And what's your itinerary and all these things? I'm like, I actually like to have time just to be and go drink a coffee in a coffee shop and strike up a conversation with the locals and wander around and explore. And I think sometimes we miss out on opportunities, even in our daily lives when we're so busy and not looking at the people around us and just kind of rushing around. So I love that about travel.
Yeah. And I became a parent, I had my son when I was 34. So I did a lot of exploring and adventure for a long time, in that way. And even when I was traveling for work and always on a plane, it was like I was by myself. I didn't have a team, I was sent to do things. And so, even as simple as the airport bar, right? You're just like, well, I'm just, sitting, I'm not going to take a table up. So you just sit up there and everybody strikes up a conversation about what they do for a living. And so, I've met some really good connections and contacts, and some of them I'm still friends with, from just a, one-time occurrence in a coffee shop or something. So, or they stop by your trade show booth and you strike up a conversation about, not even about what you're selling, right? But I like that. I like conversation.
What made you want to get into the yarn industry? That's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So I was, my mom had cross-stitched something for my college graduation, and we went to get it, properly framed. And so the place in town that did that, because you could take it to any frame shop, but she's like, I want this handled like properly, right? Like stretched out and beautiful in the frame shop. Well, they were also a knit shop. And so we were like looking around, and she's like, God, it would be cool to like be able to do this. I was like, yeah. So we took a knitting class together. And so we did learn to knit. We took a couple other classes. And then, as she says, like, I went nuts with it. So before I knew it, I was teaching the classes that I took. I was changing all the patterns. And then someone's like, man, you'd be really good in sales, like as a sales rep. I was like, really? Like, I don't see that. I didn't see that. And so that went really well. And so usually the track is like do that for 10 years and then become like a sales manager of a team. And so I think I was a sales rep for, I don't know, a year and a half. And then I ended up moving up really fast and then VP of a yarn company. So, but it was all just same thing, like just talking to people, networking, seeing where the gap was. Like I was really good at, I was honest, I was a good salesperson. And I was just like, hey, I look around and like, some salespeople want to sell you the whole thing, right? Like I want to say everything I have. And to me, I was like, if I can just get in the door with one thing. So I'd find the gap they had and say, I think I have this product that fits here for you, for your customer base, and then lo and behold, it would turn into more and more and more from, me, or I'd help them, or I'd teach a class in there, some sort of silly marketing thing, right? Where it was like, hey, I could, when I'm in town or when I'm in Chicago or I'm in Indiana, we could do a workshop, or I would do yarn tastings where people could try out the yarn or the needles and, just kind of always like, exactly like people always ask me, I'm like, I will always admit I never know what I'm doing. It's more of just like, I'm willing to try. So people laugh it off like, and I'm like, no, it's really just like an adventure, like looking at something and saying, oh, we could do it this way. Like maybe this will sell something, because I always put myself in the consumer seat. Like, what would I want to see? And I try to really stay there. Even when I'm doing stuff in my new world the last few years, I'm like, if I was a parent reading this, or if I needed this resource, or if I needed food, like, what kind of thing would I want to read about? What would get me there? Right.
Yeah. So Erica, I want to know about the transition from working in the yarn industry and then how you got to doing what you're doing now. Because it's so interesting to me. Like the evolution of the person is always so interesting to me. And so I'd love to hear how that all kind of came about in your life.
Sure. So I had my son when I was 34. And so I transitioned from working out of the home to being a virtual assistant to a designer. And so, I'd handle travel schedule and contracts, work with the mills, like all that kind of stuff, because I had that experience. And then it was just becoming too much. And so then I started my own marketing firm, and then did that I still do that. So that was when he was 2. So I could choose my clients, choose my hours. I was like, this is what I need, because my husband worked a ton. And so that was our kind of flex, right? It was like, if I have the flex job, he had the more rigid, punch in and punch out sort of job and extra hours and stuff like that. So that's what worked. And because of that, I took a major pay cut, and but I still wanted to do all the things. And all my friends were like, oh my gosh, don't you miss travel? Once you get married and have kids, you won't take off to Beijing for a month or, whatever. Right. And I was like, I do, but I mean, I absolutely love being a parent. And so all of a sudden there was that burn, when, he was a mobile age, 2. I mean, even before that we would do stuff, but it was just, your kid's personality, right? And so he's kind of a mini me. And so he's always up for a road trip or an adventure. And, he couldn't even say adventure, but he'd call it venture, and he was like, what's the venture today? And I was like, right. And sometimes it would be just to go to Home Depot or name the fruits at Trader Joe's. It was just whatever. Right. But I was constantly looking for free concerts, things at the library. So we just did all that stuff for 2 years. We would do all the things, and I would just post about it. And then friends of mine would text me, say, well, you know what to do this weekend. What is it? And so I'd be texting them out, what's going on this weekend? What's free and cheap to do? And I think a lot of people assumed we had a big income because we did all the things. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we only go to the museum on the free days, several times a year. So we would just navigate our calendar around all the free fun. And so instead of waking up and saying, I'm going to do this today, it was more I would look at what to do, and then I'd figure out, what to do on certain days. And that's how we lived our life. And so I kept telling him that. And then one day it was, look at my husband. I'm like, God, should I create this hub for people to find all the free and cheap things? He's like, I've been waiting for you to say that. It was really cute. It was just yes, do it. You're good at it. And people come to you. They trust your opinion too, because you seem to seek it out. Can I take a stroller? Can I take food? Can I have internet access? Is parking easy? Is parking pay? I knew all those things because with a journalism background, I was like, I need all the facts before I go, and I'm fine with On the Fly and researching it just before we go, but I knew how to find the information. And if I couldn't find it, I would get it. And so I started Frugal on the Fly. So I would start following a lot of mom blogs and such that were about budgets and, not having much money and trying to do things. And they didn't appeal to me. I was like, I am not that much of a planner. So I was like, I can't do meal planning and couponing and all these things, but we would grocery shop. We would start at the back of the store first. And I don't know if you even know these exist, but all kinds of grocery stores, they have these racks where it's they need to sell them today. So it was they'd be reduced produce or reduced whatever. Or if you buy meat a half hour before the meat counter closes, there's deals, So that's how I would shop every week. I would shop all that first. We lived in this little corridor where there were 2 or 3 grocery stores. So I'd hop those really quick, and they were close together. So it wasn't a waste of time driving or gas. And then we would eat what's on sale. We were always navigating what was affordable first, and then from there. And so, that all led to talking about it. So Frugal OnThe Fly was born. And so I just did a Facebook page and an Instagram page. And I would just constantly post like, did you know posts like, hey, it's free weekend at Henry Ford, thanks to whatever corporation, so free admission or there's just on a daily basis, there's so many free things to do that we can't even get to them. Like that's what I was starting to find. And I'm like, is this cool? And then I would also talk about volunteer opportunities in the community or things you could do in your own community. And so I wasn't gathering people at that point. I was just showing people what they could do or showing people what we did in our lives. So my son, he started volunteering when he was 2.5, and it was really on his request versus mine. Like we would do stuff together. He would watch me do things like stuff bags. We would do a lot of blessing kits for the homeless at home. So, he would just kind of hand things to me as I put them in the bags. And then, at stoplights, he would see me give out granola bars or water or dollars to people in need. And one day we were at this intersection and he was like, I want to do it. So he's in the back seat in a car seat. It's 2.5. And I'm like, you want to do it? He's like, yeah, I want to hand out myself. And I was like, okay. So it was like in that moment, right? Like we had talked about it. And I was like, well, here's the thing. I'm like constantly talking about how everyone has a voice, right? And you do things on your own and you have to be the change. And I can't really do things for him when he has the desire to do it himself, right? So I rolled out his window and he's got his little handout and he's like kind of doing this with a granola bar. I was like, just thinking like, I hope this goes okay, right? And then the guy walks around the car and goes to his side and he looks him in the eye and he was like, I love granola bars. He was like, I was hungry. And Patrick goes, I knew it. And so he was so excited. And then that was that. Like he, from then on, we'd go to the store and he would choose what would go in the little bin next to his car seat of like what he wanted to pass out, like what he thought people needed or tasted good or whatever. So, we would do that constantly. So he had this little bin next to him and he would pass out his own things and he'd let me know when it was empty. And, we went from there. Right. So then we would there are programs in town that you could decorate the paper lunch bags for lunches for the homeless. And so, we color them at home and do those kinds of things. Right. And so at the same time, I was just kind of slowly showing these little things of like what you can do at home, because service was a big part of our family when I was growing up, and it was a big part of our own family unit. But I think a lot of parents tend to wait till middle school or high school or some sort of school organized function. And not on purpose. I think they think their kids are too young. And so I'm just one of like little people have thoughts and needs that they need to do and act on and get out. And so we just kind of, kept going. And then in 2020, in June, I heard about the Farm to Families grant, and Food Rescue Detroit had gotten this grant, and it was boxes of produce, and they were looking for other organizations to pass it out. So like basically all the food was coming, but they were trying quickly because of course everything can happen last minute, right? Like you wait for a grant to come through, or wait for approval. And it's like, cool, it's all good. Find a location. It's coming Thursday. It's like, oh no, like we were waiting all this time, but didn't get things in place. Right. So that happens to me a lot. I don't know if that's necessarily what happened to them, but like that kind of stuff has happened to me. So anyway, heard about it and I thought, oh, he's in Zoom school and he has Fridays off and I'm, just working from home and extremely reduced, work. And so I thought maybe we could do this. So I called the organization and they're like, yeah, absolutely. And it was a Thursday evening and I was like, when does it start? She's like, well, food's coming tomorrow morning. And I'm like, tomorrow. Okay. Tomorrow. And so she says, yeah, just, what location figure it out. Just how many boxes do you want? And I said, well, what do they like? She goes, there's 32-pound boxes of fresh produce. That's a lot. It's a lot of food. I was like, okay. So I was like, well, how about 25? And she's like, all right. She's like, well, do you think you can get rid of it? Like, I don't want food waste. And I said, I know you don't know me, but I don't like to waste food. We even take every leftover and I repurpose the leftovers. I was just like, I won't. I promise you, if I can't move it right at that moment, I will find where it needs to go. I said I've worked on boards and different community organizations in the city for lots of years. So I was like, I can definitely connect to people that I can find out where to put this. She's like, okay. So I sign up and then call several friends that work in the community, and they're like, oh, it's too short notice to like kind of gather something and put the word out, right? And because it's fresh, it can't sit around. And I said, totally understand. So I just kind of kept going off my mental list of like who I could call. And then my friend Riff is a mom in Hamtramck and just works, with all his people in the community and just has this huge heart and is just always taking care of his neighbors. So I call him and he says, oh, there is such a need in Hamtramck. And I said, I'm glad I called you. So what can we do? And he was like, well, I'll tell you what. He was like, why don't you pop up in the parking lot at Joseph Camp on Holbrook and I'll let some people know. And if you have leftovers, even my neighbors that can't get out, why don't you bring it over at the end if you're willing to do that? I said, I am. This is kind of last minute. We might have more time to do it next week and organize it. But so I got home. So now it's like, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night. And this stuff I got to pick up at 8 in the morning. I'm like, okay, how can I get people to know about this? And I was like, I'll create a Facebook event. So I created a Facebook event. And it basically worded as like, if you need it, come get it. I'm going to pop up at this corner from this time and first come, first serve till it's gone. So we do that. So we have to drive to, which is now Huntington Place, but at the time it was TCF Center. So you have to drive to TCF Center in the loading dock, load up your car, whatever you've allotted for, and then go back to wherever your location is. So they just fit in my minivan. So I'm glad I did 25, because I was like trying to think about like, how much is this, right? And so Patrick and I, so he's 8 at the time. So he's like, they're even like, I know, shouldn't get this out, but it probably wasn't the safest. I mean, he's holding boxes against him, like all the way back to Hamtramck, right? And I'm like, okay. So we get there. I mean, I have like them in the seats and, up on the dashboard, like we fit as much as we could in that car. And I get there and I'm like, how are people going to know it's me? Now I'm in a parking lot full of cars. And Patrick's like, oh, we could use some of this cardboard. And he's like, you always have Sharpies. He's like, we'll make a sign. So we just write like free produce on the sign. And like, I have duct tape in the car. So I have pictures of all this of like our first day where we're like hand drawing this in the moment. Right. And so lo and behold, within 20 minutes, it's gone. And so I'm like, whoa. And then Patrick's bummed because there's more people in line. And I was like, well, you don't understand. Like, it's a spreadsheet. Like, some people came to get 200 in a truck. Some people get 20, like it's all allotted. And he's like, I know, but there's still people hungry and they're still here. And I said, Patrick, and I kept blowing him off. Like, just kind of, adult explaining to him of like, you don't understand the world, kid, and he was just so genuine about it. And he was just like, but why can't you ask? And I was like, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm listening to you. I will call. Because I said, you're right. If we don't ask, we'll never know. Right. So I call and the organizer said, oh my gosh, someone couldn't show up. They had like a flat tire or something. So we have extra. And he was like, I knew it. And so I said, well, now what though? We have to go get it. It's going to take 45 minutes to get back here. They're standing in line. And he's like, just explain it. And I was like, okay. So we went to each car and explained it. And then several of them didn't really understand because they didn't speak English. And so I was like, okay, we'll go to the next car and the next car. And then the 4th or 5th car down, a guy speaks English and Arabic. And he was like, hey, how about I explain it? I was like, that's awesome. You're the leader now. So I was like, you explain to every car here. I'm going to get going. And I said, this is your choice to stay, but it's going to be first come, first serve. So like, you guys manage it. You guys figure it out, but I will be back. I promise I'm getting it. And he was like, got it.
Watch In Tandem, the new short documentary by One Girl Revolution, which highlights the incredible story of Caitlin Cullen and her restaurant in Milwaukee, The Tandem. The Tandem is more than a restaurant. It's a family, a community that at its height was a bustling restaurant serving food and supporting every single person who walked through its doors in one way or another. If someone needed a job, you got it. Having a bad day and needing a smile or a laugh, the Tandem's got you. Having a rough time and need support, the Tandem isn't just a restaurant, it's your family. They got you. When COVID hit in March 2020, the Tandem stepped up to serve the community in a new way. They stopped selling food to customers and started solely feeding people in need. The Tandem community ended up feeding over 115,000 people during the first year of the pandemic. Absolutely incredible. Get to know Caitlin and the Tandem story in One Girl Revolution's new short documentary, In Tandem. Watch In Tandem today at onegirlrevolution.com or on YouTube. Please watch and share this inspiring story.
So we load all up, we come back, there's a line. So Patrick is just cheering in the back seat. He's so excited. And we pass out all the food and we have just enough boxes for the people that are there. And Patrick looks at me and it's like, sorry, I cry every time I tell this story because it's like, it's that simple. We asked for, just asked for what needed to happen, right? And it was meant to be that we went back because everyone got what they needed. And so he looked at me and he was like, this was so cool. And he was like, can we do it again next Friday? I was like, yeah, it's you and me, bud. And so he's like, all right. So each week we would have to kind of check in and see how much we wanted because maybe some organizations were off or whatever, or had more people or less. So each week I asked for double. And they thought it was nuts because I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, I moved 50 boxes and I don't even know what I'm doing. And like, so it's like, I think, what if all of them tell their neighbors, right? Like, well, we'll need more food. And so she's like, okay. So we would do trips and then, and then I would just ask each person, like, how many boxes, or how many people in your family? That's what I asked people because I didn't really know how to do this. And some people would want to show their license to prove they live there or they had, information that they were, maybe on ABT. And I was like, no. I was like, you don't need to prove anything to me. I was like, if you need this food, it's yours. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah, it's yours. And they're like, okay. So then Mohammed comes along and he got a box the first week and I remembered him back and I said, I remember you. He's like, you remember me? I was like, I do. I remember you because you were walking and I said, this box is heavy. How are you going to get it home? He's like, you did. And he says, well, I was fine. I got it home. He's like, good. And so he's like, so is it just you and this little kid doing this? And I said, yeah. He was like, you're crazy. I was like, yeah, I'm kind of that way. Like I just jump in and probably don't think about all the details, right? He's like, well, you're doing a really good thing. He's like, hey, I'll tell you what. He's like, I'll help you all day or however long it takes if you hold a box for me. I said, absolutely. So he was my first volunteer. And it was the coolest experience. Mohammed and I are still the bestest of friends to this day. And it was magic because he spoke 2 languages. So he could communicate with everyone. And it wasn't just about like what they needed because, we could just be social, right? Like they could find out my name and ask me a question, because there were so many questions about me, but they couldn't ask them, right? And I couldn't understand them. And so it was so neat because it just brought down a language barrier, so it was really cool. So we kind of became a family. And so in week 3, all of a sudden, like a couple other friends were teachers and they're like, hey, we could join you. Like, we're home for the summer. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Because now Patrick's out of school too, the summer's over or the summer has started. And I said, yeah, that'd be awesome. Like the more hands on deck, like we can get more. And I was like, if you have actually an SUV, you could follow me and I do less trips because I would leave. Now that I have Mohammed, I would leave him there and we put so we'd unload all the food out of my car, stack it in the parking lot. Then I go back. So I would just keep driving back and forth for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, if you meet me in the morning, like I would do less trips, right? Like how great is this? Or maybe we get more food or whatever. So it just grew from there. And then in week 3, it just dawned on me of like, how are people finding out about this? Like, these are the lucky people that happen to be here one time or happen to see the Facebook event. But what about everybody else? What about their neighbors? What about the ones that don't have a car? What about the ones that are sick at home? And I just kept thinking about this and I just was like, all of a sudden I told all the volunteers, I was like, stop asking how many people are in their family. Because if they had like more than 2 kids, 3, 4 kids, like we would give them an extra box because that's a lot of people to feed, right? So that's what we were asking, because I think that's a traditional question in line is like, how many people are in your family? Like, how much food do you need, right? And I said, no, that's not what we're doing anymore. And they're like, what? And I said, we're going to ask them how many people they want to serve. And they all looked at me, and Mohammed's like, well, that's not how those lines usually work. I said, I don't care. It's my line, my rules. And he was like, true. So I said, yeah. So I said, if they want a box for their neighbor or their cousin or their mom or whatever, that's what we're doing now. And he was like, okay. So that changed everything, because we can now all communicate with each other and have this conversation. If they happen to speak Arabic, Mohammed would help with that. But then what I noticed in week 4 and week 5 is that people looked me in the eye. They never did before. And I didn't really notice that or pay attention. We're hustling, like, because they would just unlock it, because it was the height of COVID. So we were just contact free. So they popped their trunk and we'd throw it in, and they'd move along. So there was just, it was pretty safe for everybody. Everybody's masked up. You had to come masked up even into my line. And so, it made it really easy. So we didn't chit chat much. We just kept it moving, and on they went. And they started to look me in the eye, and then they were like, wow, thank you. And then, some people would cry, and they're like, yeah, I was feeling bad that I got this, but like, I know my neighbor has a lot of kids, but like, she can't get here. Like, they don't have a car, or they, share a car, it wasn't accessible. And I said, that's not how it should be. So I said, and plus I said, this is costly to have everybody in line, right? You got to sit there with the gas running and all that. And so I started talking to him, and I said, hey, if you want to send a delegate from your street and you have 10 houses, that's what you're going to do. And then the next week somebody else does it. And so we were figuring that out. And then we became this like huge community, this huge family, because we're all just taking care of each other. And we'd remember who was there and who wasn't there. Is always someone sick now, because people were getting COVID on and off, and or whatever happened. And so it was really cool. And then before I knew it, I had this bank of 40 volunteers. And so I need about like 10-ish. I mean, that would be great, but, rotate through them. And so now it was called a volunteer each week too. Come to this, spread it around, make sure people know, but also if you help, we can serve more people, make it easier. Then LaFontaine heard about this because I posted a networking group. It was Terry Bean's networking group. And he was like, well, how can we help you? Like, I know you're getting the people there, but how can we help you? And I just kind of blurted out of like, I just need vehicles. And I was like, and my vehicle isn't even big enough, but I just, need vehicles. So people are starting, I had this train of like 8 cars that would meet up at TCF with me, because I'm like, no, these are all mine. Because my friend that owned a valet company in Detroit, she was like, well, I got to escalate. And I was like, put the seats down, join me. And so, everybody was like, whoever had this huge car, right?
Caravan.
Right. It was an awesome caravan. So then LaFontaine reached out, and they're like,
a dealership for people that aren't.
Oh, sorry. Yes. LaFontaine Volkswagen reached out, and they're like, well, is that all you need? I was like, yeah. And so Thursday night I would go and pick up like a cargo van. So now I have this huge vans. And then I drop it back off after produce. So they would loan me vehicles every week.
Wow.
And I know. And then I could even keep it an extra day, because they're like, I'm sure you're doing something. I'm like, well, tomorrow, yeah, I'm rescuing this and feeding this. And, because it was like, you're in that world now. So you found out other things that you could do. And I said, oh yeah. Or I'm doing this coat drive, or, oh, it'd be great. I'm doing this. They're like, all right, bring it back, Saturday night or Sunday, leave the keys. Right. So that went on for months, and it was great. And it grew and grew and grew. So before I knew it, we were feeding 2,000 families every Friday morning.
Wow. Erica, it's so inspiring. And like what I love so much, and you shared about kind of the trajectory of your story, how it's evolved and grown. And you have this blog where you're like, these are free things to do. And then these are volunteer opportunities. I think a lot of times people in the world, they don't know what to do. And what we saw during COVID, more than ever, people were stepping up and just figuring it out, right? Like, okay, my neighbor needs food. My neighbor needs something. I hope that continues. I hope that heart of service from people continues throughout the world as things go back to quote unquote normal, whatever that looks like. But I don't want to lose sight of what you ended up asking, because it's so profound to me, where you asked, how many people do you want to serve? And I think all of us, if we looked at our lives that way, like, how can we serve more people? How can we do something kind for people every single day? The world would look so different. And bringing your kids into it, you must be such a proud mama, but I think it's so important for children to learn how to serve other people and take care of other people and see the humanity of the people around us. So many things in the world. I was talking to somebody the other day just about all the gun debate in America, and not to get into that now, but I think that a lot of that stems from, we have lost sight of the human beings in front of us. We've lost respect for our neighbors. And that starts when you're a kid. You know, there's like this song from my mom loves South Pacific, the musical. And there's a song about you've got to be taught. And it's teaching children not to like people that look different like that, you know, differently from them. And in this culture that still continues, we need to see each other as, you know, our people and our neighbors. And what you've done through Frugal on the Fly is incredible, and just built community where you're staying in touch with these people. I'm sure that they're staying in touch with each other, checking in on their neighbors. And you've just created this culture, which is incredible.
Yeah, it was, as simple as that, right? Like I instilled it in my son, like, even the people that are, you know, asking for help, food, money on the corner, like, we have always called them our neighbors. And I think that's like, I mean, it sounds pretty simplistic, but it's like, no, we're in a community. Like, I'm not just raising this child, I'm raising a citizen of a community. Like, at a small age, you know, so he's very aware of his world and his surroundings. And for him, like, you know, we were talking about food security, and it was a problem even before the pandemic. Or I don't want to say a problem, but like, it was an issue, right? Yes. It was very high in the Detroit area. And he was asking me, like, you know, I don't know, like, how does it happen? And so to me, I explained to him, I said, well, the pandemic is really an easy explanation for kids, I think, to grasp. Was like, he watched so many of our friends or myself shift in a job, lose their job. You know, I said, well, here's the thing. Like, you could be on a 2-income, you know, family, and you have a house and a car or whatever based on that, right? When you lose half of that, like, all of a sudden, depending if you have the ability to have a savings, things can crumble quickly. And that's what we were seeing in our line, is people were in a food line for the very first time in their lives. You know, there was definitely people that had been there before, but, you know, it was just on the rise, on the rise, on the rise. You know, the pandemic put so many people into shock because it was just uprooted immediately, you know, and very few people, I think, are prepared for a situation like that. And not that they're not a good planner, like, we don't know the story behind what happened in their lives before then. They could have just finally got the good job or whatever. Or like I was telling Patrick, I was like, healthcare is nuts in this country. And I was like, you know, if someone's sick, I mean, that can bankrupt you, you know, because not just with money, but like, or a child that's sick at home, or, you know, it's not just the medical bills, it's I can't work the same that I could work because this child needs care, or we can't afford a nurse to stay at home. So we are. And so you're navigating like all these things. And so I said, you know, there's so many reasons why people are here, but for us, we don't care what the reason is. We're just happy they're here. And we are happy that we can provide a service that they might need. I find other organizations reach out to me and be like, hey, like, we have a ton of bread that needs to move right now, or community gardens. I worked with Pingree Farms, and, you know, they would have just this ton of tomatoes one week, or zucchini or whatever. And I was like, yeah, if you can get it to me, or I'll figure out how to get it. So we were adding like all kinds of different things. Sometimes we would have milk, and sometimes meat and cheese. And it just grew. And then it grew enough that I was no longer going to TCF. 2 semis were coming to my location. every Friday
Wow. Oh
morning.
my gosh.
So it was like, oh my gosh, it grew that much. Like, how amazing is this that we just would like sit in the parking lot and wait for the semis to show up and unload pallets of food into that parking lot. So in 23 weeks, the thing Padraig and I started, that's my son, if I didn't say his name already, we passed out over 1 million pounds of food.
It's incredible. It's incredible, Erica. And I want people to think about your story. It's like you literally put one foot in front of the other. And you were like, I don't know. I think COVID is an interesting thing for us to talk about too, because we all felt helpless, right? March 2020, we didn't know how to help ourselves. We didn't know how to help anybody. Should we leave our house? Should we stay home? Should we do this? Should we do that? There was so much confusion. And what we started to see, you know, after a couple of months, people were like, okay, this is what, or even some people, it was a matter of days. They were like, all right, this is what I know that I can do. You know, I love the stories of, there's a woman from Washington State that made lasagnas. She was like, I know how to make lasagnas. And so I'm just going to post on Facebook, and whoever you are, wherever you're from, just come and pick up a lasagna. You don't even have to see me. You know, I'll leave them out in a cooler and you can just go in and pick one out. Or little kids that started, because like your son, they were staying home and, you know, doing, virtual school. And so parents that stepped in and said, hey, let's sit down and draw pictures or write little cards to the elderly who are stuck in senior living facilities, who are terrified. They're also not getting any visitors, or, you know, not seeing family members, and they're lonely and sad and scared with everything that's going on. And we all have the ability to change the world through our lives. And sometimes it can be a really big thing, like 2 semi trucks and unloading pallets of food. But a lot of times it starts just like yours. It starts with this little small, like, hey, this is what I know I can do. And then it just can evolve from there.
And thanks for interviewing me and highlighting that, because some people got to know me later. So they saw a huge operation, right? Or they started volunteering when it was just massive. And they're like, I don't know how you did it, but like, I can't imagine, or I don't think I could do something like this. So I think it's neat to hear the grassroots beginning of a story. And, you know, I didn't know what I was doing, but I just tried, right? And I also looked at it every week and figured out how I could do it better. And I also asked the volunteers, like, you know, is this working? Like, or do you like doing this part? So like the more volunteers we had, it was cool. Cause at first it was just me, Padraig, and Mohammed. Like Padraig couldn't lift the boxes, but he could pack trunks and close trunks. So he was like on that. And then he would also go to the window and be like, you know, how many people do you want to serve? So he could have that job, because it was important for him to have a role, right? Like, he's like, I don't want to just sit here and play trucks. Like, we would bring the trucks. And then after a while, he'd get tired of doing it because he's 8. And I'm like, okay, you can play trucks in the dirt now, you know? But most of the time he didn't play trucks. He wanted that role. He wanted to be empowered to help just as much as we were. And like, I think when you see kids get empowered like that, it's like, that's, you know, they follow along to what everybody tells them to do, right? With teachers and parents. And like that's what they do all the time. Until they really play at home or play outside, they kind of have this freedom to do what they want, right? So I think it's neat for them to really embody a role like that, because it feels important and it's their thing, you know, because someone else would come to help. And I was like, no, Padraig does this. And then he was like, you know, little hands proud on the hips, like, yeah, that's my job. You know, like, don't take my job. Like, that's what I like to do. And then, but we would have a meeting, like, and it was not a meeting. We would just talk about how the day went. And I was like, how's it going? Like, cause I would be deep into driving back and forth to get all the food. Like, how's it going when I'm gone? Like, is it working? Like, could we do something differently? And, it was really cool to see like how all the volunteers too were like, oh, like, this isn't your show. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm telling. I was like, you know, they didn't say that to me, but I could see it in their face, like, oh, and they're like, well, actually, I was thinking, like, while I was observing this, and I'm like, perfect. Or I'd find out, I actually, you know, can't lift stuff. So can I ask, or can I pop the trunk? You know, so there was just different roles that everyone could do. Right. And so that helped a lot with the growth of it, was just people asking everyone on board, like what's helpful, what makes sense. And then one day, Mohammed comes to line. He's like, I have an idea. And I was like, okay. And he pulls out 2 fat markers out of his pockets. And he was like, we're going to make this line run better. And I was like, really? I was like, I'm in. Well, tell me about it. And he was like, and we were really good because I said, as soon as we stopped traffic, we were in a very busy intersection in Hamtramck, like 2 main streets. It's going to be an issue. Police are going to be like, okay, like this is clogging traffic, you know? And I was like, we just need to keep it going. And, you know, so I was always worried about logistics and making things better. And he was like, it's the markers they use at the car wash. And he's like, we're going to write on the windows how many boxes they need. And I was like,
cool.
What? And so it was just like a game changer, right? Because I was like, get out of here. I was like, that makes so much sense, because now we would place someone way down at the end of the line and they would talk to every car. So when they got to us, all I would do was read the number and throw the food in the trunk. We moved faster than we'd ever, you know, thought we could, you know, and it was stuff like that where it was like, we just had logistics down and we all communicated really well with each other. And then we flipped around the roles. Like, that was, now we had enough people that we could move around. So if you're like, oh my God, I can't lift one more box, like my arms are done. I'm like, all right, you're moving to marker duty, you know, and like do just back and forth, move around. And that's the thing about helping is like, I think a lot of people too, like, are tentative about volunteering. So they would reach out to me and say, you know, I don't know what I could do, but I'm handicapped. I have limited abilities, you know. And so part of it was like, but they really wanted to be part of it. And I was like, well, we do. There's a marker roll. There is also, we would break down cardboard boxes sometimes, like, or make piles. You know, we had all these little things to do because when we left, it was clean, because I was like, I don't want anyone complaining that we're in this parking lot. You know, there's no trash. There's no trace of us whatsoever when we leave. And, you know, that works really well. But the one thing I would say, I was like, you know what, please just share what we're doing. Like, that was the thing. I was like, that's what we really need. I was like, yeah, I need people there to help. But I said, what I really need is people there to take the food. I was like, I don't want any leftover. And we never did. We never had any leftover. Now, I didn't waste one apple ever. And so that was really cool, is that people understood like how things evolve and move, right? I was like, marketing works if everybody's talking about it. Not just me in this little, you know, space on Facebook. So that's what helped too, is that like the sharing from everyone else. And then that they, you know, felt part of it, that they could help. I was like, you have no idea how helpful that is. And I was like, go into the, you know, in a Facebook event and click going too, or interested, even if you're not coming. I was like, your friends will see that, you know, so they were starting to understand like, oh, I said, that is extremely helpful. And then sharing it's even better, or, you know, passing it around, shared at your church or community group or senior center, like whatever those places are, right? Like, we just need to get it around.
Yeah.
And then really, and it ended because the grant, you know, ended. So it shrunk quite a bit. Like, you know, we did several rounds of it and then it got smaller. And so, you know, there was just not as many organizations and it was getting colder. So we didn't have a building. So, you know, we had to deal with rain and snow and, you know, things like that. And so we just, you know, couldn't continue on like that. So it worked for the time being, but I didn't stop.
Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate.
I heard about a women's shelter that could now take children, but they didn't have space for kids, right? Like things to play with, you know, desks, and then it was virtual school still. So they're like, if we could revamp this 3rd floor to make that accessible to have kids here too, like we could probably house them. I was like, well, so I did multiple fundraisers for that. And like, again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool to have like, help my musician friends, because all my musician friends were out of work, right? Like all the venues were closed. So I closed a street in Detroit and did an all-day jazz festival in March of 2021. So we had 5 bands and there was a $5 cover, but I was like, this is going to be a concert on the fly. So you can either stay in your car because you'll hear it down the street. So if you're comfortable with that, or you bring a chair and everybody spread out. So we just kind of spread out all over because you could hear it everywhere. And it was really fun and really great. And then we just kind of kept going. And we did diaper drives. Patrick and I have helped a ton with the formula shortage. We did school supply giveaways, coat drives. I know, sorry, I'm trying to like think of everything.
But I love it. I love it. And even
it's been a lot in 2 years.
It's a lot, but it's so incredible even to watch on social media. And I will encourage everybody who's listening to follow you and share. I always say on this podcast, it's a free way that you can support the work that people are doing is follow their stuff and share it with their friends. And, you know, as you continue to evolve and as you continue to do things, it may give people ideas of things they can do in their own communities and get their kids involved in things. And I just love your story so much, Erica, because you're just doing what you know or what you see, and kind of back to your career in the yarn industry, just talking about how you found, you know, where there was the need or where there was a place that you could fit in. And that's exactly what you're doing with Frugal on the Fly. Like, what are things that we can all be doing? And I think if we just open our eyes and pay attention to what's going on in our own communities, we'll see those needs. And also don't be afraid, like you have, like reach out to a women's shelter or reach out to a homeless shelter and find out exactly what they need. You and I were talking before we started recording just about how sometimes people are trying to do good and they just get all their friends to donate a bunch of stuff and then they drop it off at a shelter, and the shelter's like, oh, actually, like we don't need any of this stuff. We don't need winter stuff when it's 1,000,000 degrees in the city of Detroit. Yet people are cleaning out their closets. And so we need to be good stewards and try to figure out, okay, what are the things that are actually needed? Formula, baby formula, diapers, female products, you know, I know that a lot of shelters need those types of things. And there's always a shortage there. So
there is. And that's the thing is like, sometimes they might need those things, but a lot of times, but people don't realize it's a space issue. So they might need the things, but they can't house it till it's needed. Right. So they're like, we do really need these things, but we have nowhere to put them. So when you inundate us with stuff, it's like, we don't even have a closet or a basement to put this in because it's full, you know? So it's like so important, as you said, to just ask directly, like, if you want to do something to help, make sure who you're helping needs the thing. And instead of having your great idea, like listen to the community and say, oh, this is what they need.
Erica, you've accomplished so much in such a short period of time, but I'm curious, what's on the horizon? Are there any things that you're working on now or things that you see coming down the pipeline for yourself individually or for Frugal on the Fly?
Yeah. So in January, I did this talk because they wanted me to talk to this group. I was on a speaker panel, and they're like, well, the organizer was like, I see you as a joy agent. And I was like, a joy agent? What is that? You know, I was like, I don't even understand that. And it's Charlie Wilberg who started TEDx Detroit. And he was like, that's how I see you. And I'm like, well, tell me about this, because this is a very interesting title. It was like, every time I talk to you, it is a constant, did you know that this thing is free and it's available once a month or every Saturday or whatever it may be? And he said, also, if you're not telling everyone what they need to be doing or taking advantage of because people aren't utilizing those resources, you're rallying all these people with your infectious like joy and passion and be like, so I'm going to do this school supply. Like, you want to join? Like, all I need is this. Everybody everybody pays $10, like we can get this done like in 2 weeks. And he's like, that's all you do all the time. And I'm like, so he's like, yeah, I just see you as this joy agent, like just going around. And so I was like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. And I kind of have parented that way. I've always lived my life that way. That's the root of our organization is spontaneous adventures and acts of kindness are the key to finding joy. Like, I solely believe that. Like those two things, like if you put those two things in your life, and if it's not all the time, just, occasionally, like just little bits, you're going to find that joy. So I did this talk and he's like, talk about, Frugal OnThe Fly and what you do. But I was like, God, it just didn't seem like enough of a talk, right? I kind of wanted a call to action. And he's like, well, you can, invite people to support what you're doing currently. And I said, I realize that, but I was like, let me think on it. I want to do it, but let me think on it. And then I just started, I was like, maybe I can in my talk list a few ways to find joy, simple, free. I'm all about free and cheap, because it's accessible, right? Sometimes it's stuff in your backyard or in your living room. And so I came up with this list, and before I knew it, I had 60. And I was like, well, that's a long list. So I was like, well, I don't know. I sat on it. And I was like, wait, there's 52 weeks in the year. I was like, I can trim this down to 52. I could make it this list and just on one page. And maybe I could print it on cardstock and pass it out. Like maybe people think that's cool. They could take it home. It seems tangible. And they can like put it on the fridge or put it in their car and like, work on it. And I absolutely hate bucket lists because I feel they are like one or challenges or things like that, where it's like, as soon as you mess it up, you're like, oh man, like now I can't do this. Right. So none of it's numbered. And I called it a journey for a reason. Like it's your journey. Like if you want to start at the bottom, go to the top. If you want to cut through the middle, if you want to do 5 things in one day. So they're just like small actions you can take. So I passed it out. It went really well. And then it kept going well.
These little things can bring so much joy to our lives, and just even volunteering, the world can seem so dark and divisive, and you turn on the news and you're like, I don't want to live in this world. Like, this is a terrible place. It's a terrible place to raise children. But that's why it's so important for us to pull ourselves out of that darkness. And it really comes down to like I love Parks and Rec. And so they have that saying, treat yourself. So my friends and I always like, if you're having a rough day, like treat yourself and like get whatever. If you want a coffee, it doesn't have to be something expensive, or just treat yourself and give yourself some time by yourself, be able to like go for a drive if that's your thing, sing at the top of your lungs. I know that was one of the things on your joy list. And we all need those little reprieves from the craziness of this world. And I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing. I will post all the links to your social media so people can follow you and all the other things that you have going on. But
I started painting last June. I don't know if I told you that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I've been in several exhibits, and I have a solo show right now in a gallery in Detroit.
Oh, cool.
There's 16 pieces of mine. Yeah. And that's all I did was just process my trauma through painting. I've never done it before. Someone said, why don't you come paint in my studio? And I said, oh, I've never done this before. He's like, no, just as like a fun thing, like a joy release, I'll guide you through it. And I got done and he was like, you should keep painting. I was like, why? He's like, you're pretty good. And I was like, really? And so I just kept going. And so I've been in several shows in the last year. So June 19th was my year anniversary of putting paint on a canvas. Isn't that wild?
That's awesome.
And then in July, a solo show. But the whole thing, like there's stories behind all those paintings, and I'm pretty open to tell you about all those things. So because my hope is like I'm putting my soul on those canvases, but there's a lot of joy there. And I'm just hoping, like looking at them, like I needed to find the joy. I needed to get through a lot of things, deaths of loved ones through COVID, the fire, I'm pretty vocal about it, but yeah, I've now been clean 102 days. So like, my giving up of substances, like this was just, you're just processing lots of things. Right. And so I threw it all on the canvas, and I've noticed that the opening reception was Saturday, and everyone that came there, like, there's so much cool energy in this room. And the people said it over and over to me. And I was like, really? Because that's what I wanted, right? That's what I wanted. I wanted people to feel something. I wanted people to feel joy. And I hope that when they go to people's homes, when they buy them, like that fills their space with joy too. Like that's the point, right? So it was pretty cool to hear that and witness that, when that was my purpose, but I didn't know if I could actually execute it right.
You did it, and you're doing it through all the different things, through your art. And I will be sure to post the link for that. So if people are in the Detroit area and they want to check it out, And I'll post all the links for Frugal on the Fly and your social media so people can continue to follow. Erica, I want to know, how can people support you in your work? Obviously, they can go to your art show, they can follow you on social media, donate to what you're doing, to the different projects. But what are ways that people can support you? Also, what would you say that how can people emulate your work in their own communities, no matter where they are?
Yeah, so definitely follow Frugal on the Fly on all the social channels. That's extremely helpful. And then share the things that you're moved to, or comment, or like, that just spreads the message and spreads the information, right? So that's part of it. Right now, we do an annual school supply giveaway. So we are in fundraising mode for that. So that is in August that we give it away. So we have a Give Butter link, and you can just click to donate, and we can make sure that as many kids as possible can get school supplies they need. So that's gone really well every year. Last year, we gave away 250 stuffed backpacks at an event. So, and we have a goal, but it's like whatever we get, like I try really hard to get the best quality items for the money that we get, I'm really true to that. Like, I'm just not a big fan of well, it's free, so be grateful. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, no, we could have gotten a little better quality pencils or notebooks or crayons. I was like, I just want it to be special always, when things go out from us. So, I have a good attention to quality. So I try really hard either to get more sponsorship dollars or find a deal. But I was like, it's really important to me that whatever we do is nice quality and it lasts. And then, come to that. And then my show is up through August 18th at 14 East, which is a gallery right next to Little Caesars Arena. It's located inside the Mike Village College of Business.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing. And I know your story and your work is so encouraging to so many people who are listening, particularly parents. I just keep thinking about you and your son going out. And I just want to encourage everybody who is a parent out there, or even people that aren't parents that have, relationships with kids. So it's, nieces or nephews or cousins. I have a bunch of little cousins. Encourage kids to get out there and do something, invite them, find something that you can go and volunteer at and bring them with you. But Erica, I am so grateful for this time.
Yeah, thanks. But I think that the one thing that people can do is find in your guts, your soul, what your gift is, right? If your gift is to talk about issues that make sense, or make sure people know about things, or if your gift is art, or if you're, good with a hammer, sign up to volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. There's just so many little things you can do that one person can't do. You don't, it might be overwhelming to start something, but there's a lot of organizations doing really good things. There's art therapy with kids, there's almost every event needs volunteers that you go to. Even if it's a music festival, they need people to help at the door or take tickets. And a lot of times, those volunteer opportunities I post about aren't always they're helping the community, but they're not always an active service. It's a gateway to do something you can't afford. So sometimes volunteering gives you access to the concert that you could never afford, or the, rib fest that you want to go to, but you're I can't really do the $10 or $15 admission fee. It's well, geez, you get to volunteer at this, and then, you get a meal voucher and a t-shirt or whatever, and they get to go all day. Right. And you get to park in the volunteer lot, not pay to park, so it's sometimes it's just access, right? It's oh, I didn't think about that. And usually those gigs are a couple hour shift. It's nothing. And then you also meet people. This is a really cool way to meet people, is to join a volunteer team.
That's such a great point. I'm going to be thinking about that with all of the different events going on in Detroit and different places that you can volunteer and give of your time and get in for free.
Well, even I'm one of the producers for TEDx Detroit, and that, ticket you might not be able to afford, but on the volunteer team, you do your volunteer slot, and then you can be in the place where it happens, right? And then you get to see some of the talks, maybe meet the speakers. But now you've been on this team all day with these really cool people, and you meet new connections, and it's unique networking, right?
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to just continue to follow everything that you're doing, Erica. And I'm so grateful for this time with you. So excited to share your story and continue to follow everything that you're doing. But before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question because we're focused on women and girls' stories. If you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I think it would be that your voice matters. Like, I think a lot of times we think that we're just one person and, speaking up and just my role, like, won't do anything or make a difference or no one will listen to me. And if this whole hour has proved anything to anyone, is sometimes just getting out there and trying, like that one foot just forward of just like, okay, I'm going to try this thing. And I can't preach enough to take advantage of the things that are in front of you. A lot of times we get roped up into our schedules of like, well, I don't have time for this or I don't have time for that. And I get that. But I'm a very spontaneous person. So not everybody's, in my camp that far. But we have had, as a family, some really cool opportunities because we took those last minute tickets someone handed us. When we could have said, oh no, it's past bedtime, or whatever, or it's a Tuesday, it's a school night, but it's like, oh my gosh, we get to sit really close. Tickets we'd never afford, right? That we get to sit really close, or even on the glass at a hockey game, or I don't know, like, or we got to hear a really cool speaker, or all those things, right? So it was just, just try, right? I mean, I know that's really basic information, not really a great quote, but I just can't say that enough. Like, just do the spontaneous adventures, do the acts of kindness, and it will lead your life in a different way. And it might not be all the time, but just little breaks of it will just disrupt your normal day or your normal month, and you'll have opportunities unfold in front of you.
Erica, you are such a light, and I'm so honored to be connected with you. I can't wait to hang out with you and collaborate. I could just feel like there's going to be some kind of One Girl Revolution and Frugal on the Fly collaboration coming down the pipeline. But I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for all the great work that you do.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the time.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.